Call of Duty franchise has been loved by gamers and despised by competitors since the original Call of Duty was released back in 2003. 7 years on, and we have yet another Call of Duty in Call of Duty Black Ops. This installment has been developed by Treyarch, the developers behind World at War, which was released back in 2008. Now this review is going to be broken up into two separate parts, one for the story campaign and one for the multiplayer component, but due to YouTube's new generous video length parameters, I thought I would just do it in one hit. So grab a drink, sit back, relax, and let's find out if this latest installment of the Call of Duty franchise is worth adding to our collections.
Wake up!
Where am I?
The story in Call of Duty Black Ops takes place in a Saw-like interrogation room in which the game's protagonist, Alex Mason, is being interrogated by two unnamed men. As Mason is interrogated, he experiences a number of flashbacks to key events leading up to his capture, and of course, we get to play out these flashbacks. The bulk of the story takes place in the 1960s, aka the Cold War era. Following a botched assassination attempt, Alex Mason is captured by the game's antagonist and imprisoned in Vorkuta, a Russian gulag. It is here that he meets Viktor Reznov, the Russian commander from World at War, for those of you who don't know. Reznov helps Mason escape, and he soon finds himself doing the dirty work for his country once more. This leads Mason into a deep conspiracy involving the Russians' acquisition of a chemical weapon and the US's attempt to stop them, and that's all I will say to prevent spoilers. One thing I found good about the story in Black Ops is that they didn't necessarily try and run the story through the perspective of two different characters like in previous games. They pretty much just stuck to the one guy, Alex Mason. Now they did include some segments where you played as Mason's CIA handler, Jason Hudson, but this was merely to tell Mason's story from a different perspective, rather than weaving a completely different narrative altogether. The end result we have here is arguably the most dramatic, interesting, and engrossing story thus far in a Call of Duty game. And I have to say that I found myself glued to my Xbox for the duration of the story mode, as I just had to see how it all panned out. And let me just say that the ending, well worth the wait. Let's be honest, there isn't a whole lot different here than in previous Call of Duty titles. If you've played any Call of Duty up to this point, you will already know how the multiplayer works, as well as have a general idea of the feel of the single player. The single player campaign has players naturally running and gunning through various different environments, ranging from Russia to Laos, Cuba, and Vietnam. As well as your typical run and shoot gameplay, Treyarch have thrown in a bunch of vehicle stages, stealth missions, and other gameplay changes to add variety and prevent the game from becoming stale. These instances definitely serve their purpose well, and there will be a lot of moments like these where you can't help but say, wow, that's fucking awesome, before probably getting yourself purposefully killed just so that you can do it all again.
Mason, they're out there.
The stealth missions are what I found to be the most epic, and one particular moment of the game had players alternating between real-time strategy elements and first-person shooter gameplay. This was a very, very interesting and enjoyable concept. Enemy AI is still a little bit stupid, with moments that they will either stay out in the open, hide behind the same cover, or just run at you screaming until you put a bullet in them. Ally AI is competent enough that they'll actually take a handful of enemies down for you, but they still can provide some frustrating moments, especially when you are trying to find a nice piece of cover and they will block you from doing so, or they'll just step into your line of fire. The story campaign throughout Black Ops is still relatively short. It won't take a veteran Call of Duty player long to run his or her way through this one. I mean, it only took me about 6 or so hours to complete. But let's be realistic, there are a number of players out there that will likely jump directly into the multiplayer component of the game, which is just as enjoyable as ever. Let me just reiterate here, it's still the same core gameplay that players will experience here as in other Call of Duty games. However, there have been a number of changes and additions made to the experience. For starters, the unbalanced perks have been refined or completely removed from the game, such as Commando, thank fucking god, One-Man Army, and even the long-time favourite, Stopping Power. Marathon does make a return however, but as opposed to providing unlimited sprint, it simply extends the time that players can actually sprint, so therefore making lightweight marathon knifing classes a little bit more vulnerable. Additionally, instead of unlocking perks and weapon attachments via leveling up, players use what is considered to be COD points to buy desired weapon attachments and perks. This works well for lower level players as they can grab their desired loadout after a few good matches, as opposed to getting repeatedly owned with shitty custom classes by players that are on a significantly higher level than they are. However, it also takes away a little bit of the replay value of the multiplayer, as most players will have their desired loadouts by level 20 or so, and therefore have little incentive to continue further, besides actually enjoying the game of course. A contracts feature has also been included which allows players to pay for specific challenges, for example kill 3 enemies in a row without dying, and upon completion of these challenges will make even more COD points. Another new feature of the Call of Duty multiplayer experience is Wager Match, in which players can bet their earned Call of Duty points on finishing in the top 3 after a free-for-all game with competing players. There are some really cool game modes implemented here, such as One in the Chamber, Sticks and Stones, Sharpshooter and Gun Game. These game modes are a fun alternative to your more mainstream game types, but be careful not to gamble too much, because if you finish outside of the top 3 players after a match, you get sweet fuck all. But 95% of players' time will more than likely be spent on the traditional online modes, including Team Deathmatch, Headquarters, Domination, etc. And these modes don't differ at all from previous games in the franchise. Taking a leaf out of Halo's book, Black Ops now features a theatre mode in which players can save their favourite matches and then add them to their file share to share with others. You can adjust camera angles, frame rate and more to make your wicked kills look even more awesome. Moving on, we also have a mode known as Combat Training, in which players can play offline against AR-controlled bots. Players can select the difficulty level for those bots ranging from Recruit to Veteran, and they are a great way to hone your skills before competing against human-controlled opponents in the actual online experience. They also serve as a great way to kick ass if you're having a losing streak like me. The bots' tendencies aren't individually customizable, which is a shame, and any experience you earn whilst playing Combat Training will not carry over into the online component, but that's obvious.
Biplane ready for deployment.
Yet another Zombies mode has been included in Black Ops, which is very similar to Call of Duty World at War. In fact, as far as I could tell, it was very similar. So for those of you that have played Nazi Zombies in World at War, you'll know exactly what to expect here. Finally, the multiplayer map variety is also good. There are 14 maps to choose from, and each map more than likely has something about it that you will like. For instance, Nuketown is a 50s style map full of old vehicles and mannequins, and upon match completion, it's actually nuked. LOL! There are a number of other maps that fall within my favourites, and I didn't really find one that I actually didn't like. As you can tell, there is quite a lot of content to delve into in Black Ops.
Coming.
Running off of the same graphics engine as past Call of Duty games, Black Ops looks amazing. The plethora of different environments it features throughout look absolutely fantastic. Character modelling and movement is handled exceptionally well, and there is a long list of big name stars behind the voice acting of each character, including Gary Oldman as Reznov, Ed Harris as Hudson, Ice Cube as Bowman, and of course good old Aussie Sam Worthington as Alex Mason. Mind you, it did perplex me a little bit why they constantly referred to him as an American throughout the game when he is so clearly Australian.
Today's the day we succeed.
Despite this minor inconsistency, Worthington and the rest of the voice crew did an amazing job in their respective roles. Treyarch's signature gore returns in Black Ops with dismemberments galore and some pretty gory cutscenes. Weapons look and sound like they should, and the game's frame rate generally keeps up a solid pace throughout the experience, which is especially noticeable in situations where you literally have a shitload of enemies flooding your position. The musical score is also a positive aspect of the game, offering each situation of the game with an appropriate theme to set the tone. That all being said, the game is not as polished as it could be. There were one or two instances where the game's frame rate did drop a tad, and one occasion a bug caused a single player campaign to crash entirely, landing me back at the start screen. But the game's presentation for the most part was very impressive and what you'd expect from a Call of Duty game.
Alright. Everything is ready.
Gear up, boys.
Say good work, Reloading, give me cover. Confirm.
Call of Duty Black Ops is arguably the most anticipated game of the year, and in my opinion, it certainly met my expectations. Although it doesn't differ hugely from previous titles, a short but thoroughly entertaining story campaign driven by an engrossive and compelling narrative, beautiful visuals, top-notch voice acting, and above all, great amounts of online multiplayer content, why shouldn't you go out and buy this game?